Do you know the different types of abuse? There are many different kinds, but the 5 types that are most commonly seen are verbal. This is when a person will purposefully degrade another, belittling or threatening them. A lot of verbal abusers will also have other abusive qualities, such as emotional abuse. Physical. This is where a person will physically attack another. Physical abuse can range from small taps or flicks, all the way to beatings. Neglect. Neglect is often seen as a separate matter to abuse. This is wrong. Neglect is when an abuser will refuse to help someone who they've hurt. They might not feed or provide water, clothing or shelter to a person. Sometimes neglect comes in the form of emotional abuse. If a person doesn't provide any support or comfort to another person in their care, this can be classed as emotional negligence. Emotional. As mentioned before, emotional abuse has many branches and comes in many different forms. Gaslighting is a form of emotional abuse, when a person will try to convince you that you are being unreasonable and that your feelings are invalid. Dog whistling is when an abuser will say a phrase that may seem insignificant to everyone else, but holds some deeper meaning for you, to make you react. Sexual. Sexual abuse is when an abuser will force someone into a sexual act without their consent. You should always remember that whether this happens to a woman, man, or child, sexual abuse is abuse. It is never the victim's fault.
I'm Robert Balfour, and I'm the founder and chief executive of Survivors West Yorkshire. Survivors West Yorkshire's purpose is to mainly focus on male survivors via our Ben's Place project. And currently we've explored digital outreach using video counselling for nearly 6 years now. And we also signpost and give advice to female survivors as necessary. Survivors, it's a lottery how you'll be responded to and where you disclose. And fear and shame are powerful motivators. Shame itself can lie at the heart of many of the issues that you see in adult and child population. And I think my observations of survivors is it's fear, how they're going to be treated. So I think it's fear. Fear, how you can be responded. Fear, you're going to have to tell all the details, for instance. But I would never ask you to describe the details of the abuse because we don't need to know unless you want to tell us. And that's the fear, because you would have to tell people over and over again all the forensic details that the police would say. Services that are really well trauma informed don't need to know. The only people who would ever need to know that is you, if you want to talk about it, because you make it public to people, and the police. Otherwise, nobody else really needs to know those fine forensic details because they're irrelevant to your psychological state. What's relevant is how you feel about what was done to you. Ring them up, email them and see what the response is, and then trust your instinct. But in the end, it's worth it, because it's better than sitting in the silence. And everyone I've ever spoken to in 22 years, sometimes it's not easy, so it's very difficult, but nobody I've ever met regrets breaking the silence, because for them, it's a release, even if it's a painful one. So I kind of remember in the late 90s, it was the age of cassette players and plugged into telephone lines. And you very rarely got a response. You were left in silence again. So it's changed now. It's substantially different. So there'll be a 24-hour-a-day helpline, support line, and all sorts of things coming online from soon after April, because they're just bidding for it now. And so you're about to ring up at 2 o'clock in the morning, and that's a really good thing. So it's about time it happened. We live in a changing world. But I may ask you whether it was an uncle or whether it was a scoutmaster or something else who abused you, where it took place, or in the family, outside the family. I get asked to do that by organisations like the Ministry of Justice because they like to collect data. There's no magic cure for trauma. It's not a magic fix. There's no antibiotics for trauma. And as a famous psychiatrist, psychologist said, the best you can do is keep them company whilst they discover and rediscover themselves. And I think that's right after 22 years. You know, don't try to fix things because you can't. Don't go out of your way to be walking on eggshells around people. Sometimes people don't want to, once is enough, they only have to say it once. Oh, yeah, that's enough, they don't want to speak. But some people want to sit there all day for 8 hours speaking about it because they've held it inside for so long. It's like you've opened the dam. And of course, most people don't have the time to, in services, to listen for 8 hours. You know, and for families, that's an awful experience because normally if it's in families, there's guilt and shame that's related to the abuse as well. But the best you can do is just don't try to fix it and ask them what they want and then help them to find it. That's all you have to do. You don't have to do anything else. Sorry. You say sorry, yeah, you know, but don't crucify yourself. Abusers operate in the shadows. The silence is their means of creating spaces to hunt. So I believe it's the challenge of the silence that's important, and that's a cultural thing. So that's challenging the whole society to stop silencing abuse survivors so they don't have to be courageous and brave, but they are very powerful. And, you know, says that hope is, you know, the most amazing tool for recovery. And this idea that everyone's damaged and they're, you know, they're kind of unable to move on from abuse is an illusion. The truth is everybody's a possibility. You know, and you are possibilities, you're not limitations. Be hopeful. People have walked the road for thousands of years of recovery. Trauma is not a limitation, it's an experience. It's the society that surrounds you that tells you you're limited. You're not alone, and you never have been alone for thousands of years. But if you're wise and you're gentle with yourself and kind to yourself, find the right spaces, the right safe spaces, and use your instinct, listen to your instinct, then you can find pathways to places that will make you feel human.
Those are the 5 different types of abuse. The most important thing to remember about abusers is that they are powerless. They feel weak, and that is why they take their aggression out on people who they deem lesser than them. You are not lesser. You are powerful. You are heard.